Today on Locked On Red Wings, Marco Kasper was taken by the Red Wings at 8th overall, and Scotty and I are going to give you guys our instant reactions.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a podcast producer for WWJ News Radio. Well, Scotty is a freelance journalist for the Detroit News and the host of Locked On Tigers. 5th win in a row, baby. Let's go. Keep that ball rolling. But we're here today to talk about the first day of the 2022 NHL Draft, and the Red Wings have selected out of Sweden Marco Kasper, center. And that was, I guess to get right into it, Scotty. Instant reactions, man. I personally was definitely not the guy I was expecting them to take at 8th overall, especially with who was remaining on the board. But, you know, Stevie, we trust.
Yeah, and I think it was never going to be a predictable player. Like, that's just not Steve Yzerman. You know what I mean? Like, it was never, I kind of wanted to say that yesterday too. I don't remember if I did or didn't. I don't think I ended up saying it, but like, it was always going to be someone that like no one expected us to take. And that's not to say that this is like some ridiculous, reach of like a dude that was like supposed to be a 2nd round pick or something. You know what I mean? Like it's not that much of a reach. I mean, Elite had him at 12. McKean's had him at 24, so they had him at the end. But like Bob McKenzie had him at 10. Like he was very much one of those dudes we talked about going into the draft that anywhere after like 8 and before the end of the first round was like a possibility. Like, you know what I mean? Like it could be anywhere, like a 20 pick range almost that this kid could have been taken in. And he ends up at a Detroit Red Wing, and I'm pretty excited about it, man. There's a lot to be excited about with him, and like they said, like Stevie said, it might take a couple of years for him to come over, but that's pretty much part of the course with the last several draft picks that we've had. So I'm really, really excited about it. I really like the pick. I'm really pumped about it. And yeah, I mean, obviously we'll talk more about, you know, his performance and what makes him good, but there's a lot of raw talent to be pretty damn excited about.
Absolutely. Just give you guys a quick refresher too. Marco Kasper is again a center. He was born in Austria, though he plays for Rogle in the SHL. 6'2", 287 pounds. He shoots left-handed. This past year with Rogle, he had 11 points in 46 games played, 7 goals, 4 assists, and we had a prospect profile on Marco Kasper with Max Bultman just 3 weeks ago. And my biggest takeaway from that is listening back on it is I need to stop trying to be funny because it's just not working. But talking about Marco Kasper, Max Bultman does a really good job of really summarizing a lot of the same things that Steve Yzerman talked about today in his little media availability. Not media availability is not the right word. When he was interviewed by Emily Kaplan.
Yeah, just post-pick like questions.
Yeah, which again, some Steve Yzerman said some Steve Yzerman things, which was great. But Max Bultman would go on to say that he is a player that may not ever develop the incredible scoring talent you might want out of a top 10 pick. He even said in the episode, he might not be considered the sexy pick, but he is a very safe pick. He has played most of this season at wing, but Max Bultman was not shaken in the fact that he played most of this past season in wing. So that's pretty standard for development for centers. In fact, Dylan Larkin played some time at wing before transitioning full-time to the center role. He is a very, very complete hockey player already, even without the scoring touch. And he is very straight to the puck. He's not afraid to get into the corner. He's got a fantastic motor. He's always trying to get after that puck. And he's got a very, very good defensive game as well. He plays both sides of the ice incredibly well. So the floor on this guy is bottom six center. That's the floor. He's almost a guaranteed to be a NHL, if not center, winger at some level. In fact, Mikhail Holm, who had Marco Kasper ranked, in the second half of the first round, even in his write-up from his Substack, which go check that out if you haven't. Mikhail Holm does fantastic job on all these Swedish players. He's Austrian, but playing in the SHL, these players. And he says that his floor is an NHL level player. Like, you're getting an NHL level player. He's already such a complete package. His downside is you don't know how much more room he has to grow. But if your floor is that you're getting a, guaranteed center, and his ceiling is he can be a top six center if he can bring the scoring along. And then Max goes on to say as well in that episode that, yeah, he, his hands maybe do leave a little bit left to be desired, but it's not as if he doesn't have them. It's almost a facet of his game that is overlooked because of the fact that the other parts of him that are so well honed are already so good. So if Yzerman and Hakan Anderson and Lidstrom and Cronwell can develop this kid and his production to be a 50-point scorer, as Boltman said, that's an effective second line center, a 50 point getter who is defensively responsible but can still drive play in the offensive zone. Marco Kasper, again, might not be the sexy pick, but he becomes a core piece. If he becomes Anthony Cirelli, that's what Boltman kind of, not one-for-one comparison, but if he becomes Anthony Cirelli, I'm really excited for a player like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other part that excites me is his physicality. Like, he's a pretty physical player, and as we talked about, a pretty big kid there. And having size at center is always exciting, but also just having a guy who, kind of a fear no one mentality. Like, he's pretty physical, especially along the boards. That's like a pretty consistent write up by anybody. Very physical along the boards and not afraid to get in there and throw the body around. So really, really excited. The kid's makeup is exciting, and that is, like you talk about, he does everything pretty right. Like, there's not a huge glaring weakness. It's just there's also not like a huge overwhelming strength either, and that's why people have him as kind of like a high floor type of pick, because he's gonna figure it out and be somewhat productive at the NHL level. It's just a matter of what the extent of that production is, and if he does just continue raising every area, then he just becomes a jack of all trades, top six center. And Stevie said the expectation was not top six forward, top six center.
They drafted him as a center to be a center.
Yep.
I mean, Yzerman even said when talking with Emily Kaplan that this is a guy that they believe his skill is underrated. And when Yzerman says that, gosh darn, I'm going to believe it.
Right.
It's no surprise the Red Wings took a guy out of Sweden, a guy from the SHL. That's what they've been doing every single year since Steve Yzerman's taken over. Obviously, Asader was out of the DEL and then later spent time in the SHL with Rogle. Same team, by the way. I believe Marco Kasper's first SHL point came off a goal from Moritz Seider. It was an assist, I believe, that Kasper provided on that. And he is teammates with William Wallander this past season, and then he played against Simon Edvinsson and came out and said, hey, I'm glad that I'm in the same organization as this guy because he was tough to play against. So I guess summarize it real quick before getting into our ad read here. Again, not the sexy pick, but this pick makes a lot of sense for trying to build a core. Not every player can be the elite goal scorer, especially in a year where we really don't know a lot about a lot of these players in the draft because we lost so much to COVID.
Yeah, no, there's some more stuff and some more quotes from some people that are super, make you super excited and are pretty cool too, that we'll get into after. But yeah, I'm pumped. I like you said, it's not when the name was announced, it wasn't a guy that I was like, oh, like I wasn't like, oh yeah, like that's who was at the top of my board too. But it's a guy that after
Careful consideration.
right. Well, not even that. It wasn't even like, oh, like I'm warming up to it and I was cold on it. It's just like that's just the Yzerman way. He's just gonna take whoever's at the top of his board, and this dude was at the top of his board. And I'm excited immediately, just not the name I was expecting to hear, but a dang good pick. And yeah, we'll talk about it more for sure.
BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all the sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet Online, where the game starts. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I are breaking down the Red Wings' 8th overall selection in the first round of the 2022 NHL entry-level draft. They select Marco Kasper, center, born of Austria, played last season with Rogle of the SHL. I'm getting better and better as I say it every time, by the way. Rogle. I think I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I think another thing, this is a little bit of I won't say tangent because it's still talking about the draft, but another thing that Steve Yzerman did during the Emily Kaplan post-pick interview is Emily Kaplan asked Steve Yzerman, how far along do you think the Red Wings are in the rebuild? And in typical Steve Yzerman fashion, he goes, well, I'm in year 3 of being general manager, so this is the 3rd year of the rebuild. And it's just such a typical, like, no BS. Like, I'm not going to give you a soundbite that you want to use. This is just, he just doesn't play those games. And I respect him so much for it. We talked about it in yesterday's episode. We talked about the pre-draft media availability, but he just, in the best possible way, doesn't care about your articles, doesn't care about, your root for radio. He doesn't want to give you the sexy soundbite. He just is like, I'm here to do a job, and I'll meet with the media, but I'm not going to say anything to the media.
Yeah, exactly. It was really funny because that was like one of the first things that Daniela said after the pick. She was like, they got on stage we were at the draft party, by the way, super cool.
Yeah.
Fun thing, great experience. A lot of people. It was a fun time. But one of the first things that she said after the pick was, again, like, nobody was disappointed because Steve Yzerman's earned the right to just be like, whoever you pick, we're going to be pretty pumped about it. But everybody was just like, oh, that's not who we thought you were going for. And one of the first things she said was, I don't think Steve looks at any mock drafts. I think he he either doesn't look at any of them, and then somebody else on the panel, I forget who said it. It might have been Ken Cal, but somebody was like, he might look at him and then just laugh, but he does one of those two things. And
he saw us was Brad Lambert and then watched him go 30, 30?
Right. Yeah, we don't. That's pain, man. That's the dog. But it was. Yes, I completely agree. I don't think he takes too much stock into other people's draft rankings. I think he only really cares about his own.
I completely agree. And again, with regards to the Marco Kasper thing, I do have to ask, again, carte blanche to Yzerman right now with his previous draft picks having been successful as they were, but do you think that Kasper was a reach in, like, your personal opinion?
I don't. This draft, I don't even like using the word reach because, like,
again, yeah,
it was a complete bleep show from like 6 to 20.
It was a complete bleep show from 1.
Right. Well, I mean, completely true. Yes. So I think I'm not sure I like using the word reach, but as far as where I expected him to go, certainly did not think he was on the Wings' radar, or at least I mean, honestly, I didn't think he was really on the Wings' radar at 8. So I think it'll probably be classified as a little bit of a reach, but in this specific draft with so much just like
variation.
Yeah, amongst mocks and amongst, what, just so much like wishy-washiness of like who knows who is going anywhere. I think this is a draft where you don't mess around and try and trade back or anything, because we saw, like you said, from 1 all the way to 30 that anything can happen. So um
It's
yeah,
crazy.
certainly like not a pick where I'm like, oh, like you should have traded back, it was a reach, whatever. Like, no, in this draft, of all drafts especially, and at 8, like, take your guy and go home.
Well, and that's kind of goes back to what I was trying to hammer home in Thursday's pre-draft predictions episode, is that what might be your number one might be another guy's like number 10. And so in the end,
Right.
why risk trading back and then potentially missing out on that player you wanted and risk trading back for when you can just take the guy you want at the pick you're at? And I think that's the philosophy that a lot of the general managers this year did. And I think Steve Yzerman followed through on that as well. And because, again, hammering home the fact that there's a lot of tape we don't have on a lot of these players. I think that we had the most tape. And when I say we, I mean Yzerman probably had the most tape on the players in the SHL and the Western European leagues because of the fact of all the scouts and people we have over there. Again, Nick Cronwall's overseas, Nick Lidstrom's overseas, Hakan Anderson, who's been one of the best scouts in Europe in the last 30 years, the guy who found Zetterberg and Datsuk, is over there in Sweden. So no wonder a guy like a Marco Kasper, who played for Rogle, the same team that William Wallander plays for, so they're of course seeing a lot of him, would get picked by the Red Wings at 8. And we've seen such a crazy variation in his draft rankings. You mentioned it in segment 1. I mean, I see him on here from Smart Scouting. He's got him listed at 31st, while Sportsnet has him ranked at 8. There's so much variation because we've seen so little on every player this year
Yeah.
because of COVID. These past couple of years, these players haven't gotten the chance to develop, that it makes sense that the guy that the Red Wings would probably have seen the most would be their number one guy on their board. We don't know if it's the number one guy on their board, but he was number one at the time of their pick, at
Yeah.
least. So the pick makes perfect sense. And again, I want to just hammer home that he is already a very well-rounded, complete package. He's not a sexy pick, but he's already a very well-rounded, complete package and has a floor of a bottom 6 center and a ceiling of a top 6 center. That ceiling
Yeah.
might be like not as high, and that not might be like your 40, 50 goal scorer that you want in the top 10, but you already have Larkin. You already have Bertuzzi. You have Jacob Vrana. You have Lucas Raymond.
And you have
You,
40 million cap.
and you have 40 million cap. So take a guy that's going to be the defensive guy. He's going to be the one who's not afraid to be grit. He's not going to be here on Elite Prospects. The thing that they've written about him is he's physical and capable along the boards, even in terms of manipulation. He recognizes the angle of defenders coming at him and knows how to beat them and escape them. He passes to the right areas, knows the next logical play in the offensive progression. He goes to the net hard and often and with purpose to screen, rebound, and score. He was good at first touches, takes them inside when possible, and leads them to the next play. That was from the Elite Prospects 2022 NHL Draft Guide. That sounds like a perfect fit for what the Detroit Red Wings need right now, especially down the middle. They have the scoring touch. Now they need a guy who does the rest of it. They need a guy who plays both sides of the puck. And Marco Kasper checks those boxes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Draper said one of the things that Draper said a couple of things about him, but one of them was that he learned the Swedish language, like when he went over to play in Sweden, like he learned the Swedish language. And he said that was like one of the things that impressed him a lot outside of his play on the ice, was that this dude was gonna go play in Sweden and then just learned like the Swedish language. Like that he was really impressed by that, and he said it showed you the type of kid that he is. But one of the biggest thing that Draper pointed out was that at 17 years old, he played in the postseason in the Swedish league. Like that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, because
And
he
he said
just
he
turned
was
18 in April.
yeah, he said that was one of the exact quote is, he was one of the best players on the ice as a 17-year-old. He seemed to embrace the moment. As the games got bigger, he got better. Both Draper and Yzerman pointed out a lot that he just is like a bulldog on the ice, and is just really is not afraid to use his body, and fears no one when he's on the ice. And the way he plays, just Yzerman's quote, like you said, Yzerman's quote is he's not super flashy, but he plays the right way and makes the right plays. He's very efficient, fundamentally sound. He plays simple and drives to the net. So you're again, high floor, not going to make stupid decisions, knows the game of hockey really well, and has that dog in him, and that's what we love. We love players that got that dog in them. So I'm really pumped about it for real. I think that, especially in a town that embraces like that kind of play, right? Like you don't see
He says wearing a Giovanni Smith jersey.
right. Well, not even like, I'm not expecting this dude to lead the league in PIMS or anything, but just like the fan base of the city of Detroit across all four sports really embraces like the grit and grind, type of players that aren't afraid to be physical and might not be the flashiest and might not put up 100-point seasons, but are one of the best players on the team because they do everything right and work hard in games. And so I think that he's going to fit the identity of the city really well. I think he's exactly what the team needs, especially with what was left on the board at 8. I think he is the perfect guy to go to. I really can't say enough good things about him or the pick. And even though even though the pick when it was first announced surprised me a little bit, just as like every Steve Yzerman pick ever has, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, and I think I just want to go back to the point you made about the fact that at 17 years old, he was playing in the playoffs in the SHL. I mean, we constantly sing the praises of the SHL for its ability to develop NHL level talent. I mean, there is a reason why the Red Wings send, when they're not playing at the AHL, why they send their players to the SHL. Granted, it may be a bigger ice, but this is still one of the best professional hockey leagues in the world. And at 17 years old, he put up 6 points in 13 playoff games, nearly half a point per game at 17 years old, playing against men. 3 goals, 3 assists. He had 7 goals and 4 assists in 46 games played. That is impressive for a guy who, I don't know what the school structure is like over there, but if he were in America, wouldn't even have been graduated from high school. And he's playing against men in professional hockey, and he's a bulldog, as Chris Draper puts it. He is a bulldog at 17 years of age against men.
Yzerman said he had one 20-minute conversation with Kasper during the draft combine and walked away unbelievably impressed.
I love it. When Yzerman's impressed, I just feel
here's the thing. Like, again, you can tell for whatever the third year in a row, you can tell he got his guy. That is
exactly.
we have no reason to not be beyond excited with Steve Yzerman guys. And it's very clear based on his comments, based on the comments made by others about how Steve's felt about him, that this was a Steve Yzerman guy. This is a guy that Steve was really impressed with. And he went in and got his guy, and I'm always going to be happy with that result based on Stevie's track record.
So. Well, and I try really hard to try and get my bias out of the way when we talk about these things. And you don't want to give your general manager, no matter how big of a legend he may be, carte blanche to do whatever he wants.
For sure.
And so, that's why I asked, in all fairness, if you thought this was a reach, because there is, a little bit of that reach factor. I mean, the overall, most places have him between the 15 and 20 range for where he's going to get drafted, and they took him at
for sure
8th. But given his track record, he does deserve a little bit more, faith. I mean, again, Seider is always going to be the example that people go back to. And the fact that Seider became Rookie of the Year and people thought he was a reach at 6. But even Edvinsson, to an extent this past year, people are saying they should have taken Eklund. And Eklund's still going to be a fantastic player in his own right. But Edvinsson went out there and was a Rookie of the Year finals in the SHL. So it's hard not to, sound super, hyper, get blinded by the dazzling lights of what Steve Yzerman does. Because he does just do really smart things. So it's hard not to give him that carte blanche when he earns that carte blanche, when he earns that faith to have in him. So
and,
was he maybe, but he could also turn out to be Rookie of the Year.
Here's the thing. He's got that dog in him.
He's got that dog in him.
Got
Do
that
you
dog.
want to quickly talk about some of the other shenanigans that happened on this day? Well, first of all, again, we were at LCA for the draft party. Fantastic event
Yeah,
and
very well.
so much fun.
Second year in a row the show has been. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
And
was this year. It was weird. This year they well, I think part of it had to do with the fact that we didn't trade up. So it was a little bit shorter this year. But I mean, still a fantastic time. It was really well put together. You know, the fact that they had the panel there after the pick to talk about it. Cal and Danielle and everybody did a great job. So it was a very fun time. A lot of people. Very, very cool.
well, then Slavkovsky went first overall, which
Yeah,
is
that was
Bob
the
McKenzie was
big.
right
Well,
again.
I mean, just every time there was a pick announced that wasn't Shane Wright. Like everybody in the crowd, the entire crowd at LCA is just you can hear the
What?
gasp and like the yelling and stuff every single time,
If you were to tell me that he was
and
not
the
going to
laughter.
be,
To be honest,
yeah, right. If you were to tell me that Shane Wright was not going to be a top 3 pick before this draft, I would have told you were insane.
absolutely, he
Simo
fell out of the
Nemec.
top 3.
Simo Nemec jumped up to 2.
And how about Seattle, man? Seattle now gets Shane Wright, who was the projected, like, borderline bona fide 1-1 pick of this draft. They
Like
get
a
him at
week
4,
ago.
and they get him at 4, and then on top of that have, I think, 4 second-round picks on Friday.
That's
You want
insane.
to talk about an expansion team that's doing stuff to get stuff moving in the right direction. That's certainly it.
Well, on that note, also Chicago Blackhawks.
Oh yeah,
I
crazy day
don't
for Chicago.
I don't want to I have very harsh emotions for Chicago Blackhawks organization, but from a purely hockey perspective, they actually did at the end of the day a fantastic job kickstarting a new rebuild. Now,
Yeah,
in a
the way you
vacuum,
explained it to me there was really good. You know, when we were talking about it while we were still at the draft party, like, you know, it was kind of similar to the Jeremy Grant situation with the Pistons. Like the Jeremy Grant trade in a vacuum, you're gonna look at it and go like, wow, we didn't get very much value for that. But then when you look at the whole day and what they gave up and what they ended up getting after the night was over, you look back and you're like, okay, like that, you know, makes a little bit more sense.
well, that's exactly it. In a vacuum, trading DeBrincat for the 7th overall pick and then what the 38th overall pick is a horrible deal for the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah, that
Because
was
you could have
definitely
gotten
the talk of the pre-draft was just like everybody, everybody saying like, holy cow, I can't believe
it was a fleece job in a vacuum.
yeah, Ottawa, good for the Sens, man. Good for the Sens.
It's just because DeBrincat is a 25-year-old RFA after this season. He still has one more year on his current contract as an RFA after next season, is already a perennial 40-goal scorer. And you traded a guy that young and that talented for the 7th and 38th overall pick. That's not enough. It just flat out isn't. I understand wanting to trade him because by the time you come out of a rebuild, he's probably going to be past 30 and his trade value will never be higher than it is now. But in a vacuum, wasn't enough. But then to flip that 38th overall pick to get a first round pick, I think it was the late 20s one they got. And then also trade Kirby Doc, who was a first round pick as himself, but just he hasn't been able to find good production at the NHL level, to the Montreal Canadiens for then the 13th pick that they had just received by trading away Alexander Romanov. So now they had what? I think they ended up with 3 or 4 first round picks this draft. That was some draft day level BS that they pulled. And it was honestly really impressive from a purely hockey perspective. The DeBrincat trade again in a vacuum wasn't very good. But when you take the whole day as a whole, they then flipped. Basically, they got the 7th and the 13th overall pick.
Right.
Or was it the 7th and a late 20s pick for DeBrincat, which is much, much better. And then they also got the 13th overall pick for Kirby Doc, who just hasn't been able to produce it. It's just they entered a rebuild with 4 first-round picks. And granted, this is kind of a weak draft to get those 4, but that's still a fantastic way to kickstart a rebuild. And I have to hand them to that from a hockey perspective, not from a what they've covered up in the past perspective.
Yeah, no, screw the Blackhawks, but definitely a definitely wheeling and dealing. My goodness, a heck of a night for Chicago.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Yeah, and then the big one was the heartbreak at the end. I was really Brian and I were watching the rest of the first round from a bar there next to LCA,
Harry's.
and
Shout out Harry's. Love him.
yeah, Harry's, man. Yeah, we were watching. We were two screen, and they had the Tiger game and the rest of the first on there. And yeah, seeing Brad Lambert get drafted, I wanted him to fall to us in the second round so badly, so
Can't
badly.
believe he
Once it
fell.
got to like 27, I was like, this might happen. And then every pick, I was like, both of us were freaking out. We were like, oh my goodness, like, please keep falling, keep falling. And we were like, trade up and take him, like, keep falling. And yeah, unfortunately, he goes there at 30. But
I cannot believe he fell as long. I mean, I can, but I also can't.
that's the dog, man. That's the dog. Brad
Crazy.
Lambert staying for life.
I'm trying to find these. I had it up earlier. All the trades that happened today because it was absolutely insane. So I can
Montreal
get
had
this
a couple
right.
too. They had a couple moves where they made a trade and then traded away the pieces they got in that trade and everything. And that was obviously part with the Chicago deal. But
So here's exactly how it happened. Sorry to cut you off there, buddy.
no, you're good.
They traded the Brinkett for the 7th overall pick, the 38th overall pick, 39th overall pick. Apologies. And 2024 third. And obviously they picked Kevin Korchinski at 7th overall. And then they traded Kirby Dach for the 13th overall pick from the Islanders. Well, Montreal had it, but it originally came from the Islanders, and a 2022 third. So they traded Kirby Dach for a third this year and the 13th overall pick that became Frank Nazar. And then they traded the 38th pick that they got back from Ottawa for the 25th pick that became Sam Renzel and Peter Mrazek as they try and solve their goalie issues. And then, of course, Toronto unloading their horrible Mrazek contract because he did not play well this past year. So 3 first round draft picks for the Chicago Blackhawks. Like I said, great kickstart. But again, like going back to what you were saying, it does suck that Brad Lambert wasn't available. Or he was available, and then he wasn't available for us in the second round, I guess.
Little heartbreaking, but I'll live. Still a successful night.
I'm trying to think, is there anything we're missing? It was so much. It was a flurry today, trying to remember everything.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was content overload for sure.
It was. No trade up this year. No trade down this year.
Nope.
Just made their pick. Red Wings will pick again in the second round.
Man.
They have two second round picks? Yeah, 2.
Yeah, 2. I think, us and the Washington one from Anthony Mantha. I think that's it, though. I think that's it. I mean, successful night. I'm really pumped about the pick. I'm really excited to watch Kasper play some hockey, man.
Trust the Yzerman, right?
Trust the Yzerman. Yeah, but I feel like that almost has like a negative connotation in the sense of like, oh, like everybody's gonna say this is a terrible pick, and but trust the Yzerman. Like this isn't, I don't want it to sound like that either. Like this kid can play. This kid can play and has that dog in him. And is a little bit of a bulldog on the ice, and I'm really excited to watch his development within the organization because kid can play.
I love it. Any final thoughts?
We ball, baby.
That's what I was looking for. We'll be back on Monday with a fresh episode here on Locked On Red Wings as we'll cover rounds 2 through 7. See what else the Red Wings can pull out. See if maybe there is a little bit of a trade. Or not. I mean, there's still going to be plenty of content to cover either way with, 6+ more picks coming. So stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.